What's up YouTube, MDEX Music back with our last video on reharmonization techniques using Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro and Oh Danny Boy. So as you may have already noticed in the intro, we're going to be talking about pedal points, how to use them, what types there are, and endings. So let's get started. Within the introduction of the video, what you saw was one of the two types of pedal points we're going to be kind of glossing over today, and that was a dominant pedal point. So that was me holding out on the left hand or in the bass the root of the dominant chord of our key. And if you've been with us, you know already that it's B flat. So the dominant, a B flat, is the F chord. I was holding out the root of F while meandering around on the right hand with all these other chords to kind of stress that 5-1 arrival, or to kind of exacerbate it a little bit more, using chords like that to get back to the 1. So there's an example of a dominant pedal point and it being in the bass that ultimately arrives to the 1 chord as our target. So there's an example of a dominant pedal point. Another way of doing it is using the tonic as a pedal point. So in B flat, our tonic is B flat. So that would be just maintaining a B flat on the left hand and having stuff on top of it move around. We do it in measure 16 of our arrangement when we do this B flat major 7 chord to E flat back to B flat add 9. So that tonic pedal point works really well where it is in our song because it's right at the end of a phrase, and that's usually where you're going to find these tonic pedal point techniques implemented, at the end of the song or at the end of the phrase. The other example that we started the video off with, the dominant pedal point, was at the beginning. So you want to use your dominant pedal point technique at the beginning of the song to kind of set it up and really draw out that 5-1, the song has begun effect. So why these work so well, it speaks to the weight or the importance that we tend to put on bass notes. And when they're there, they kind of hold down everything for you and you can kind of do whatever you want. And as long as the bass note is concrete and solid and there, you're good to go. I guess it's kind of like you can let out as much slack on your kite as you want so long as you're holding on to it. It doesn't matter how far away it is or how blustery the wind is, it's still going to be there and you can reel it back in whenever you want. That bass note has that anchoring effect to where whatever goes on top of it, it doesn't matter. So aside from the bass being a good place to put the pedal point, the melody is also an excellent place for it to go because it serves just as much of a weighty anchor for the ear as the bass does. So when you want to use the melody or the highest note of your voicing, however you want to think of it, as the pedal point, it's best to do it with the 1 or the tonic. So in our key, we're using B flat, and it would sound like something like this. So if I have a B flat chord, that's going to be my pedal point, and I've made it the uppermost voicing of the chord, right? So if I keep that there and then move the chords underneath it, you get this effect. Right? So I could do whatever I wanted underneath. I was moving the bass along with the chord. It wasn't static that time. It was my melody that was static and constant, as you could probably hear. It has that same weighty, this is where we are, don't worry about that other noise stuff. And it eventually resolves back to that 1 chord again at the end. So the pedal points, whether they're in the bass or whether they're in the melody, both serve to kind of anchor where you're at to the point where it doesn't matter what kind of blustery stuff is going on outside or around it, that you're good to go as far as you have a calibration to this is where we are or this is where we're going. In the case of the dominant pedal point, you knew somehow that it was going to go to the B flat, to the 1 chord, whether you realized it or not. So aside from keeping your endings short and to the point and succinct, you can also be a bit more expressive and elaborate by just adding more chords. And you can do that a multitude of different ways. So you can do it simply by just climbing up the scale diatonically and going like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to the 1 sort of progression. That would give you kind of this sound here. So you do your 2, 5, 1, and then 1, eventually back to the 1 again. So now that we have that cool, more extended ending, let's reharmonize that. We can do 2 simple things. Remember the sub 5 we used earlier? We can use that in place of the 5 I just played as the next to last chord. And we can also, I don't know, let's make the 4 chord minor instead of major. So we initially, our 4 chord sounded like this. So now it's going to sound like that. And the sub 5 that we talked about earlier is still B7. We're going to use that. So we're going to get our 2-5-1 and then go really cool, right? So there's the sub 5 in place of the 5, and there's a minor 7 chord for the 4 instead of the dominant 7. So there's our extended ending with the sub 5 we talked about earlier, and then altering or reharmonizing the 4 chord to be a minor 7 instead of a major 7. And that's the exact ending we get in our reharm of O Danny Boy. Okay, so now let's talk about extending the ending by not arriving on the 1 chord right away in conjunction with a previous technique we already talked about, which was a pedal point in the melody, or the highest note of the voicing. So what we're going to do here is talk about 2 different ways where we can do that, or how we can do that. So we've set it up with our 2-5-1 like we have been. All right, so we'll do this. And then we'll go flat 6, flat 7, back to the 1. So there's just a couple things you want to make sure you're doing when this happens. One thing is that the 1 of the key you're playing in our case is B flat, is the upper note of the voicing. That is our pedal tone. It's up top, it acts as our anchor. So when I play the G flat and when I play the A flat, add 9, it's still hanging out up there waiting for this. So we've extended the arrival to B flat, also at the same time using a pedal tone technique that we talked about earlier in the video. So that's the extended ending with the pedal tone in the melody, or the uppermost voicing. How do we get those chords? Where did they come from? Where did the flat 6, where does the G flat come from when you're playing in B flat? Where does the flat 7, where does the A flat come from when you're playing in B flat? So this basically brings us back to our map again. If I'm just going to go 4, 5, 1 like we have been, I've been talking about that constantly over the whole series of that clockwise movement around the map from dominant, from subdominant to dominant, back to tonic again. That's essentially what I just did with my flat 6, flat 7. We're just kind of reharming those chords. I could reharm that to be a 2-5-1 and get the same movement that we're talked about. Now I can take that C minor 7, that is my 2, and swap it out for another chord in the region. In this case, we're borrowing from minor, which we said is okay if you're in major. G flat has the B flat that we need, all right? So that's another thing I have to mention. So the B flat we're using at the top as our pedal tone has to be in the chord scale. Not in the chord, but in the chord scale that the chord comes from, all right? So B flat, that's easy to see as part of the chord scale because it's part of the chord, all right? So that's an easy one to see. Where it gets tricky is when you use something like the A flat, add 9, because the B flat we're using is not in the chord, but it's in A flat Lydian. It's in the chord scale that this chord comes from. So we can do that, that works. And it's obviously in B flat's chord scale because it's B flat. So what we did was reharm E flat to C minor 7 and then over to G flat. You can just really reharmonize E flat to G flat directly. Does G flat have a B flat in it, or does G flat's chord scale have a B flat in it? Yes, I can use that, all right? So now we get to the F, the 5 chord. Let's use any chord in this circle, whether it's in the major portion of the circle of fifths or whether it's in the minor portion of the circle of fifths that has a B flat in it, or more to the point, any of those chord scales that have a B flat in it, we can use. A flat Lydian, while it may not be obvious by looking at the chord, A flat Lydian has our note, so that's why it worked, all right? So I don't want it to appear to you guys that we're just picking random chords, and what we are in a way, but there are certain rules we're following, all right? So for someone to say, just do this, and you copy them, I guess that works, but there's a method to the madness, and there's an understanding that goes behind this harmony that's going to empower you to do it at will, when you want, and how you want to do it. And this is that understanding. It's these chords, their chord scales, where they come from, what your melody is, what key you're in, all this stuff, all right? So I can probably be very reductive and deduce it down to, it's just a flat 6, flat 7, just do that, but why, right? So this is why. The melody, the pedal tone, the key, the chords, chord scales, these all have to come into play when you're thinking about how to reharmonize something, all right? So let's talk about maybe another example of the same exact techniques. So let's simplify this process even more by removing one of the rules that I just spoke to. Removing the rule of like, we're reharming something and we're always going in this direction of the map. Let's take that out of the equation for a second, which allows us to do a couple things. It allows us to be more outside the box, and it gives us a bit more freedom as to what chords we can grab. We're still going to follow the rule of this being our pedal point, it being the uppermost voicing of the chord, and it being in whatever chord we select's chord scale. That's really all you need. So this really speaks to what we talked about earlier as the pedal point being a really, really strong tone, especially if it's the one of our key, which this is. So all I have to look at now is anywhere on the map that might have B flat in its chord scale. So let me just show you first what we're going to end up with, and then I'll show you how we got there. So we're going to do our 2-5-1 as we have been doing. We're going to delay the arrival to the 1 chord by using this chord here, and then going here, and then eventually, you can hear it coming, the 1 chord there. So what did I just do? All right, so what the first chord I played as my delay point to the 1 after the 5 was this B major 7, which is right there in our Mapping Tonal Harmony application. That chord's chord scale is Lydian. So I know right off the bat that it's essentially the leading tone of that chord scale. B flat is. Remember, we're talking about, we are looking for this note to be in all of these chords' chord scales. B flat is the leading tone to B Lydian. That's why I can use that chord. The next chord I went to after that was A flat minor 7. That chord's chord scale is Dorian. So as we're like shooting through these chords and I'm saying where their chord scales are and knowing whether or not this note is in that chord scale really speaks to the power of knowing your scales and understanding your scales as a means of not only navigating music but composing it and improvising it and arranging it. So I don't expect everybody to have every single scale and every single tone of every single scale deposited in their memory bank and have it on hand like that. So I would really seriously recommend some sort of tool like Tessitura. We'll put a link to it down there. You can check it out. It is the absolute best dictionary out there for referencing a scale and what notes are in it, how to play it, different practicing techniques to use them. Using so if it's not Tessitura, use something that'll allow you access to these chord scales and know what their tones are. What is this chord scale? What is that chord scale? And Mapping Tonal Harmony tells you right up here what chord, whatever you've selected, what its chord scale is. So you can cross-reference this source with that source and have everything you need. Some of the chords or scales you're probably already going to know, hopefully. You may not know all of them though. So if you don't, find the means either through Mapping Tonal Harmony and Tessitura or some other way to get this knowledge on hand, because it's not all going to be up here, at least maybe not right away. So having said that, we go to A flat minor 7. We see it's Dorian. Our pedal tone is the 2nd scale degree of that Dorian chord scale. Where do we go after that? We went to D flat 7. Its chord scale is Mixolydian. There's the 6th scale degree of Mixolydian. B flat is. All right, and then we just went to our 1. So that's how we got this chord sequence or this progression. really cool way of delaying the ending, using pedal tones, and all the techniques we've been talking about recently. All right, guys, so that concludes our extensive series, webinar, seminar, whatever you want to call it, on reharmonization, all the techniques used to do so. Please check out the whole series. It might take you a few times through. I definitely recommend like kind of maybe cycling through some of the videos over and over again so that it kind of sinks in. Just like learning anything, repetition is key. So check them out. If you don't get them right away, that's okay. I didn't either. Just kind of repeat it. Eventually it'll sink. Stick around. We have some bonus content coming up with regard to the series we just put out there. If you haven't already, check out Mapping Tonal Harmony Pro. Check out Tessitura. Check out all the tools we've been using to get all this awesome work done. Thanks for watching.